Hi everybody, thanks very much for joining our webinar on the Orbit Compliance Tracker. My name's Mary-Claire Wilson. I'm a relatively new member of the Life Sciences team here at Huron. I'm a project manager in a variety of projects, including those relating to Orbit and also projects relating to digital risk minimisation. I'm here with Piers and Michelle.
Hi there, good afternoon. Hello everyone, my name's Piers Rycroft. I'm a consultant here in the drug development team at Huron Consulting Group, formerly Pope Woodhead. I've been working with the team at Fife Systems who've been developing Orbit as part of their PV compliance tracker for the past 18 months or so, and have been working with a variety of pharma clients implementing this solution. So yeah, we look forward to talking to you about this today.
We've also got Michelle Peralta with us from Fife, which is the company that makes the Orbit system. Michelle, could you give us a very brief introduction if you're there on the line?
Hi, this is Michelle Peralta. I am the Senior Director of Business Strategy and Development at Fife Life Sciences. I'm the in-house subject matter expert for the Orbit system. A little bit about me, I have 20 years of pharmacovigilance and clinical safety experience in both the pharma and CRO setting, and I specialize in pharmacovigilance risk management.
Thanks so much, Michelle. So between myself, Piers and Michelle, we hope to be able to answer any questions that you might have about the system at the end of the webinar, which leads us to this next slide. Really appreciate you joining us and we look forward to your participation in this discussion. At the bottom of your screen on the Zoom icon, you should see a Q&A function. It's right at the bottom of the screen, it's in the black bar. And if you please use that to submit any messages, these could be messages about audio visual issues, if you've got any problems hearing us, if you can't see the slides. We are monitoring this Q&A function, so we'll be in touch to help if you put a message through there. Also, please use the Q&A function to submit any questions, and we'll discuss them at the end of the webinar. We'll pause about halfway through just to make sure that there's an opportunity for you to type in any questions, but we will come to them at the end of the webinar. If there happens to be anything that we can't answer here today, we'll take those questions away and come back to you. Wanted to let you know that a recording of the webinar is going to be available after today's event, so there is no need to take notes, or if you've got a colleague who wanted to join but couldn't make it, they'll be able to listen to it as well at a later time. Also, to let you know, we are planning further webinars on specific elements of the Orbit system later on in the year. So this is the first of a series, and it's very much an introduction to what the system can do. So I have to unfortunately start with an apology, because we've called this Decluttering for PV Professionals. So some of you on the line might be big fans of decluttering, as made famous by Marie Kondo, who you see in this picture. We're not going to be telling you about how to spark joy by decluttering your home or your physical office. What we are going to be talking about is decluttering your work processes. So according to Psychology Today UK, decluttering your physical space can bring a number of benefits, including a sense of competence, increased energy, reduced anxiety, and improved relationships. So who would have thought you could get all of that from just tidying up and throwing things away? What about your work processes? Well, surely there can be a sense of achievement for straightening everything out, but more importantly, you could have more time to spend on what really counts in your job. Instead of wasting hours following up on tasks and trying to maintain different trackers and not being sure if something's been done, you can actually take the time to work on the things that you want to work on. This is surely going to reduce your frustration and perhaps make you happier and more prepared to interact positively with your colleagues and have the time to get new ideas. So that's why it's a good idea to declutter your work processes. So we're going to be talking about how you can do that using the Orbit system. You might feel today a little bit like this picture on the left-hand side. You've got very many trackers, processes, meetings, emails, all of these things that sometimes feels it's probably driving you crazy. Too many things to cope with and keep track on. With Orbit, you could be feeling calm, compliant, and in control. And we will tell you how that might actually happen later on. So we will be spending a little bit of time talking about the key challenges that are related to compliance tracking in PV today. We'll introduce the system to you, and we'll demonstrate how it can help meet some of your PV compliance tracking needs, and then hopefully at the end answer some of your questions. So as I said, this is quite a general discussion today, and we will be honing in on some of the particular aspects of the system in future webinars. So please watch this space if you'd like to know more about a particular area. Okay, so into the problem. What is the issue that we have today? Thinking about the compliance related needs across safety, whether it's related to risk management plans, signal management, aggregate reports, PV agreements, there are 3 areas that we've come up with. This is not an exhaustive list, but one is around tracking. So you want to keep track of the status of processes, of approvals, of the effectiveness of any of your interventions. You also need to report on things, and we live in a very metrics-driven culture, don't we? So you need to bring together all different sources of data, integrate those types of data, analyze them, and present the outputs in many different ways. You might have the same information that needs to be presented in 5 different ways, depending on the meeting that you're having, and you need to be able to do that sort of thing quickly. Finally, you need to be able to collaborate. It's probably unlikely that all of the people that you need to work with are sat in the same office as you. They are probably in different offices, different countries, maybe even different continents, but you still need to be able to distribute tasks to them. You need to collaborate on documents across the geographies and also across different functions, which can be perhaps even more challenging sometimes than working with people in other time zones. So maybe other areas, if you can think of any others, do put them in the Q&A box, and we can talk about those at the end. But these are the 3 common groups of compliance related needs across safety. We have to meet these needs, and we do. I'm sure many of you feel that you make things work. You've got multiple tracking spreadsheets to keep on top of all of this. You've probably got multiple versions of the different documents. If you're working offline, you've saved something to your desktop, your colleague's done the same thing, and then you're not sure which is the most up-to-date version. I'm sure that's a common event in most people's lives. Document sharing issues, you forgot your password, why can't you log in, what's wrong with the system, did your colleague check the document back in, all of these daily little frustrations. You end up having a lot of meetings just to check what's going on with all these different bits and pieces, lots of emails, lots of follow-ups. And whenever you've got a global local situation where you've got a global position that needs to be rolled out to a variety of geographies and then also interpreted in line with local regulations, that makes it extra difficult. So we could call all of this clutter. And this, of course, leads to reduced efficiency and stress. So confusion, there's a risk of mistakes. I mean, how do you know that you're updating the right document? Do you feel that you've ever got complete oversight of the processes that you're working on? Probably not. And this can lead to difficulty making decisions, barriers to getting things done, which really shouldn't be there. And often quite a lot of additional unnecessary work, and sometimes communication breakdown as well. So lots of reasons why you might want to change the situation that you're in. Now, I'm not going to read through every slide on here. You will get a recording of this webinar. It's just a little bit more detail around the 3 areas that we identified earlier, around the tracking, the reporting and metrics, and the collaboration. So as we've established, the ability to track documents, activities, and statuses is a key element of an efficient PV department. So for risk management plans, you might want to track status and approvals of your internal core RMP, the status of HA approvals, interactions between the global and local documents, for example. And we've got points for each one of those. So I'll just pick on a few of those particular ones. PVAs, that's one we hear about a lot. You might want to know about how many PVAs you've got by country, by product, how are they different, what are the associated terms and timelines. You might want to be able to see all that at a glance. Additional risk minimization measures, again, status and approval is a key one. Across all of these areas, something that would apply is whether an activity is overdue or not. So whatever you're working on, you'd surely like to know when an activity is overdue or about to become overdue. That's kind of a key point. So when we think about reporting and measurement, there are many different things that you might want to report and measure. So numbers of documents, types of documents, status of documents, number of additional risk minimizations, number of risks. The list is probably quite long for this, actually, in reality. one of the things that you would certainly want to think about across all of these areas are the timelines for particular workflows. How long has a process been stuck on a particular area of the workflow, for example? Because metrics and reports really are central to decision making and oversight in our current way of working for most companies. So finally, collaborate. What are the sort of things that we hear from our clients that they need to collaborate on? Well, report authoring or any kind of document authoring is a key one. Often you'll need to be creating a document with people from many different functions and many different geographies. You'll want to align global and local documents. Approvals as well is something that you want to collaborate on with others. And across all of these areas, a very important one is readiness for audit and inspection. Nobody does that on their own. You certainly need your colleagues from other departments and other offices to work on that with you. So that's a pretty stressful task. So these are all points that we have picked up from our discussions with clients. We also thought we would do a survey just to assess the current state of many of our clients and contacts at the moment. So thank you very much to everybody that participated in the survey, which ran throughout May. We covered questions on tracking approaches by the area of safety, the efficiency and scalability of the approaches used, and the percentage of the team's time spent on tracking activities. We had a fantastic response, 34 data sets received from a variety of pharma and biotech companies. I'm now going to share with you a couple of the key slides that we put together with the results of that survey. So we asked about how companies are tracking PV activities at the moment. And what we saw is probably no surprise to anybody on the call, but most of our respondents are using custom systems or non-specific tools to manage tracking across safety. So if we look at the graph, we've got the different areas of safety there: signal management, RMPs, AE reconciliation, and so on. And for each one, you've got a stacked bar adding up to 100%. The gold portion of those bars represents the percentage of responses relating to use of email or spreadsheets or SharePoint, so non-validated, non-specific tools. The dark blue relates to custom in-house system for tracking, so something that you've made yourselves. And then we've got the grey part, which tends to be the smallest part of any of those bars, and that relates to external/licensed system for tracking. So if we average out the non-validated tools use, it's 30% on average across all those activities. So this means using things like email, Excel, SharePoint to track your essential PV activities. Then, of course, we see mentions of custom in-house systems for tracking. Now, of course, you may have built a fantastic one that does everything you want and it's very easy to maintain. But we've heard, let's say, different stories of our clients' experiences of homegrown systems. And it is probably only a minority of responses that are using a licensed system for tracking at the moment. So that's the grey bar on each one of those activity areas. The biggest grey bar is on the signal management bit, and this is suggesting that signal management is the activity that's most often tracked using an externally licensed system. So whether that's because it's a priority area or just because there's something that's decent and that's available, that's what we saw in our survey. So how good are these current tracking approaches at the moment? So again, we've got the different areas of safety down the left-hand side, and for each bar, the dark blue now relates to our tracking system is great. It meets our needs and it's efficient and scalable. Then we've got the gold, which is, you know, it meets our needs most of the time, but it's not efficient or scalable. So it could be time consuming or clumsy to use. And I think based on the sorts of discussions that we've had with clients, this probably is where most companies would fall in this area. So you've got something, you're making it work, but you know that if you were to acquire some new products or there were to be some changes, it would be really difficult to scale it up, and perhaps quite a lot of time is spent just trying to get it to work. The grey bars, so not many people have owned up to that actually, having a tracking system that straight up doesn't meet your needs or is not efficient and scalable. And then we've also got the red bits at the end, which are the respondents that are considering improving the tracking system. So on average, across all the activities, again, we've got 41% of respondents that did not feel that they've got an efficient or scalable tracking system. So there are definitely improvements to be made. And I think, frankly, if there weren't improvements to be made, there probably wouldn't be a system like Orbit out there available, because it was developed to meet a particular need in tracking. The activity area with the biggest grey bar was PVAs. So 12% of respondents stated that PVA tracking system that they've got at the moment doesn't meet their needs and is not efficient and scalable. So probably something that in the near future would need attention. So what's really important here? It's probably how much time is your team spending on dealing with these issues. It doesn't really matter what system you're using. If it works and you're not having to spend a lot of time thinking about this or doing things related to it, then it's probably fine in some ways. But what we see is actually a lot of time is spent doing PV tracking, and was probably never the intention that that would be the case, that up to 50% of your team's time would be spent just on keeping track of activities and statuses and all these bits and pieces. So the red bars relate to more than 50% of the team's time overall being spent on tracking these particular activities. So you can see there are red bars for all of the activities apart from signal detection, strategy and signal management. And interestingly, it was the signal management where we saw most use of the license system, the external systems previously. So we haven't analyzed these results with statistical methodologies, but it is something that we notice when just looking at these graphs. So the blue bars are 25 to 50% of teams' time overall being spent on these activities, and the gold bars, which is the most predominant colour on that side, is 10 to 25% of the team's time overall. So they are quite broad buckets of times there, but personally I think that even between 10 and 25% of your team's time just been spent on keeping on top of your trackers is quite significant. But yeah, certainly there are some areas where it's perhaps more of an issue. Okay, so that's about the end of my introduction. That's really just setting the scene. We'll just pause for a moment to see if anybody has any questions or comments. We won't take them right now, but just to give you a chance to submit your questions via the Q&A function, and we'll come back to them at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the introduction there, Marie-Claire. So I think we've established that this is a key area that PV operations teams need to be involved in, and it is an issue for a lot of companies out there. So I want to talk to you about a specific solution, which is the Orbit compliance tracker, which has been developed by Five Systems. And I'd just like to come back to the slide that Marie-Claire showed earlier, that there are a huge range of activities that need to be tracked through PV operations. And this involves not just the PV safety scientists, but colleagues across regulatory affairs and a whole range of stakeholders within pharma and biotech companies. And so the team at Five Systems, they initially developed a solution to track specifically risk management plans. And as we've been discussing, these tracking needs, this ability to report on activities, this ability to collaborate with colleagues across different functions, different geographies, it's not unique to risk management plans at all. It's an issue for all of these different areas of pharmacovigilance operations and safety science. So it was a logical next step for the team there to evolve and build out this tracker to encompass all of these different activities. And as a result of that, you get a very nice sort of byproduct of that, in that you can integrate all of the data into a single system. You don't have to have a single tracker for your risk management plans. You don't have to have a single tracker for your PV vendor agreements. You can integrate all of the information into a single system and get a more comprehensive view of what's going on within your department. By capturing all of this information into a single system, by tracking what's going on, by default, you're capturing all of this information into a system, and you can pull reports from it. You can pull metrics. You can report on exactly who is doing what, when, how long it is taking them. And by giving different people access to the system, you can collaborate, whether that's just on sharing the information and sharing the reports, but also you can distribute activities. You can follow up on activities. You can set reminders and notifications, and you can also collaborate on authoring documents. So as I was mentioning, by having a single system, it allows you also to standardize some of your data inputs across your various products, across your various territories and local markets. And it allows you to standardize your tracking processes as well. So everyone is, if you like, singing from the same hymn sheet. Everyone is performing the same activities and reporting on the same things. The ability to collaborate, I mentioned there briefly, that within the system, you can set activities around authoring documents, and you can also set up various rules within the system to notify people when a document is updated, when they have a task to complete, or perhaps they have a regional or product responsibility and they want to be notified whenever a new signal is added or identified, or whenever a new risk management plan is added or updated. They want to know whatever's going on with their product, and they can set up rules within the system and be notified whenever anything relevant is happening. And also by having a cloud-based system that's modular, that has this ability to track all of these different aspects, it's a lot quicker to roll out than building your own custom in-house solution that you would then have to validate internally. So by having it hosted on Amazon Web Service, it's in the cloud, it's accessible to all of your stakeholders, there's no performance issues, whether you're working in the US, whether you're working with colleagues across Europe or the rest of the world, everyone is accessing the same database. You're able to add and update the system in real time. And you can integrate it with your existing product lists or terminologies and drop-down menus from your existing safety databases very, very quickly. And also integrate it with your current IT infrastructure and single sign-on, so people don't have to remember usernames, passwords for multiple systems. By bringing all of the tracking of all of these various PV activities into a single system, it allows you to integrate all of these different actions and activities that are going on within the pharmacovigilance team. So for example, you could be tracking individual safety signals related to a specific product from being identified, reviewed, validated, and those safety signals then become important identified risks that you then need to address in a new version of your risk management plan. So you can, although you're tracking discrete items, you're integrating all of this data into a single platform, into a single system. And that process then follows through. So you've got identified your signals, they're stored in the system. The action item from that signal is to update the risk management plan. The new version of the risk management plan is captured in the system. The outcome from that risk management plan might be you have to update or some additional risk minimization measures. And you're tracking all of these different activities, although managed by different members of your team, you're tracking them all within a single system. And so by integrating all of this data, it also allows you to report on it in real time. You have a single database. You don't have multiple versions of Excel sheets flying around. You don't have people unable to access SharePoints, or they're working from home and they can't contact the VPN. It's accessible through the cloud, and the database is constantly up to date. So if you go to pull a report or see what the current status is of safety signals for a particular product, or which current versions of risk management plans are implemented in different countries, you know that by going to the dashboards for this database, the data that you're looking at is constantly up to date. And that's the same for all stakeholders as well. So if you have regulatory affairs who are also users of the system, they don't have to contact their colleagues in pharmacovigilance to find out what are the current states of safety signals, when can they expect a new version of the risk management plan. Everyone has access to the same data. And this also means that everyone can pull reports from the same database, and they can decide what format they want to pull those reports in. It might be that they want to work on the data and they want to present it in a different way. They want to do some analysis on that. They can pull a report into an Excel format or a CSV file and manipulate the data and do what they need to do with it. Or it might be that they just want to share something with their colleagues in medical, and they want to provide the data and they can extract the information as a PDF. The system allows you to filter these reports and in various ways, whether it's by product or region or a date range. It really depends on what your reporting needs are as to how you would go about configuring the system and building in these one-click reporting functions. I'm just going to take a little bit of time now as well to show you what the system looks like in a little bit more detail. So this is by default the home screen that a user would arrive at. On the left-hand side, you have a series of quick navigation options. I'm just going to focus here on the activity stream. That shows you what every user is doing in the system in real time as they are making changes. So you can see who's doing what, basically. You've got your list of commitments there, and those are any activities that have been assigned to you as a user in the system. So on your homepage, you can see that this user has to review the final report as part of a Global Safety Committee review, and that set of tasks is currently on track. If we move to the tracked items, by default, all of the information is available to any user in the system. But if you want to refine that view or sort of ensure that you're looking at relevant information, you can set up user groups of users within the system and assign them permissions. So your safety scientists may only be interested in creating and tracking signals, and your risk management team may only be interested in creating risk management plans or risk minimization measures in the system. So you can set up those as separate user groups, and you can assign them permissions to create the records in the system as needed. Or you might have regulatory affairs as a stakeholder that have access to the system, who are not responsible for any of these activities, so don't need to create or update the database, but they want to be able to access the information for their own needs, so they would have read-only access, for example. So if we drill down into a particular record, we can see how these records are structured in the system. So if we take, for example, these core set of additional risk minimization measures for this product, you can see on the home screen that the implementation is in progress in this tracker status. And you can see when that activity was last modified and the user that was making changes to that. And if we drill down into a record, all of the records in the system are laid out in a very similar way. So whether it's a risk management plan that's being tracked or whether it's a safety signal, the records are broken down into these sections that you can see on the left-hand side. There's an item details section, there's version information. Some of these are more are relevant to particular types of activities or particular records in the system. So for example, for this risk minimization measure, you have the ability to upload source information, and that might be artwork or templates that the local markets would then need to translate and adapt and localize. You might have safety concerns there. So if you have different versions of educational materials that are addressing different safety concerns, you would capture that in the record as well. But what we're showing here specifically is this relationships section. So this in database language is showing that these core set of materials, these education materials for HCPs have been developed, and they've been pushed out to a series of local markets for them to implement. And these records in the system here, so we've got Austria, Belgium, Czech Republic, are the child records. And you can see there that these countries are in various stages of implementing this new set of educational materials. So the Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland at the bottom there, they haven't acted on these new set of materials yet. You can see that Belgium have completed their implementation, but they have a deviation. So that might be that, for example, they didn't have to submit the new version to their health authorities. They went straight from translating the materials to distributing them. And you can see there that Austria, their implementation is currently in progress. So this is giving you a very specific example for risk minimization measures, but the same sort of principles apply to all of the records in the system. You could create a relationship between a safety signal and a new version of a risk management plan, or you could create a relationship between a signal detection cycle and the new a signal management plan, for example. That's given you a very, very quick overview of the system and how it's laid out. I also want to just quickly talk to you about a particular case study of where this system has been used with a client of ours. So they had they were a medium-sized pharma company, but they have a very decentralized network of distributors and vendors that are performing various pharmacovigilance activities on their behalf. And they need to have oversight of which RMPs are being implemented in which countries and which vendors are responsible for those RMP activities. And as a result, which risk minimization activities are being performed in which markets, so which versions of their educational materials are being utilized where. And so by having this decentralized approach of using PV vendors, it puts a lot of burden on the regional safety teams to have oversight of all and tracking of all of their different all of their different vendors. It's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of emails backwards and forth to be kept up to speed for all of the different activities that are going on that are mandated in those risk management plans. There are also multiple internal stakeholders that need to be involved. So if you're marketing the product, but you've outsourced your PV activities, you need to be able to contact with medical, so they know if their field force or the sales team are handing out versions of educational materials as well. They need to be kept up to date. And by having multiple vendors that are operating in slightly different ways and have maybe different agreements in place, they might have different ways of reporting on this information. Some may be having weekly meetings and capturing and having phone calls. Some may be sending stuff by email. Some may have access to the SharePoint and be updating an Excel tracker directly themselves. But it was a very chaotic situation, and it wasn't clear exactly which vendors were reporting in which ways. And so by implementing the Orbit tracker with this client, they're able to gain visibility over which RMPs are implemented in which markets, and which risk minimization measures are being tracked, are being implemented, sorry, and track that against the RMP version that's active for that country. But by implementing this activity tracking, there was an added benefit that they realized, and they have utilized the system to track their own internal compliance activities. So within their internal SOPs, they had requirements for local markets to provide certain metrics and certain KPIs and certain key performance indicators about their risk minimization activities to the global team responsible. And so in the same way that they were tracking these distribution of educational materials from a core position to the local markets, they've used the system to send out an activity an oversight activity, and notify the local markets that they have to provide this information, these metrics, back to global within a certain time period. And then they can track each local country as and when they provide the information in the system. So that's just a very neat example of where Orbit has been implemented, and some of the additional benefits that they were able to realize as sort of a byproduct of implementing a centralized tracking system that was accessible both to the global teams to set up tasks, and also the local affiliates to update on them. And so I'm just going to leave a quote here from one of our clients that has implemented that's implemented Orbit, whilst I hand back to Mary Claire to see if we have any questions on the Q&A.
Thanks, Piers. Before we head over to the Q&A, I just want to leave you with a little bit of information about the approach that we take at Huron. So obviously a software solution is only ever part of the overall picture for efficiency and value. It's quite difficult to separate software from business process or organizational design discussions. Alongside any software changes, it's a good idea to think about process optimization, because even the best piece of software in the world can't fix a broken business process. If you are making changes to your processes and/or your software, that should be embedded within a well-designed organization where the communication is transparent and where there's training in place that's relevant and useful. Culture is something that also needs to be thought about, because the sort of culture that you have would drive how processes are implemented and how the software is used. If you've got perfect process and great software, that's fantastic, but if nobody uses it, it's not really going to add value to your organization. So that's really just leading into the approach that we take at Huron, to think about the business process expertise alongside deep expertise in benefit risk, organizational development work, and what we can offer is PMO support and software support. So very much we're thinking about software being implemented within the context of optimized processes and an engaged organization. So we can help with all of these areas across a project. So just something to think about as we head into the Q&As. So I think we've had a couple of questions come in over the course of this webinar. So we've had one about whether use of Orbit is, if it really is better than using spreadsheets and SharePoint. Now, I think that the example that Piers just talked through shows that there are many reasons why that might be the case. other things that we need to think about is it's validated. It's been proven in audits. That's also quite important. It is off the shelf, but it can be configurable for specific needs. And there are obviously a lot of features that are available in Orbit that you wouldn't get with the typical spreadsheets or with SharePoint. A key one is highlighting delayed tasks, the documents been sent for review and approval, and status being tracked. So that there are lots of ways in which it's better than just using spreadsheets and SharePoint. And it's very much a case of thinking about if spreadsheets and SharePoint are scalable and efficient, you might be able to make it work. You might feel that you can live with it for now. But certainly when we think about efficiency and being fit for the future, it does offer a lot of benefits over that. A question here about the financial side of it. Is it a really good investment to make from a financial perspective? Well, one of the things that we've heard from our clients is that if you develop your own system, if you've decided that using spreadsheets is not going to get you to where you want to be, or it's not going to be fit for the future, and you decide you're going to build your own, you need internal resources to be able to do that. So that means that they're not working on other projects. So with Orbit, you don't need to take up the time from your IT department or any of your other colleagues to develop it. We'd obviously need their input for various things, but it's a case of not taking up their time. Okay, we have had another question about whether the system can send automated requirements. Short answer to that is yes, it can. Automated reminders, sorry. Can the system send automated reminders? Yes, it can. And there are different ways that you can set this up. You can set up auto reminders to yourself, or you can set them to go to other people. Michelle, I don't know if you have anything to add to that point about the automated reminders?
Yes, there is a way you can set activities and tasks and then schedule or set a due date for that, and have also set responsible users who are to comply with that due date. And then the Orbit has a milestone engine associated with it, so that when you when the time comes closer, you don't have to remember, you don't have to go back and look at your emails. It will go to the responsible users before the actual due date. It can be, and you can set it to as many times as you want, and how early before the deadline, and then the users can instantly go in to the system and complete their task. So you don't have to constantly go back and see if you sent an email, you reminded them, or when the due date is happening and who needs to be aware. It all happens in the system, and it's all captured centrally within Orbit.
Great, thanks Michelle. It's Piers here now. So we've had another question through of, does the system track document content as well? So the system it has a document management system in the back end. So you can upload the physical documents, the RMPs, or the committee meeting minutes, or the educational materials. You can upload them directly into the system and use it if you don't have a document management system that's accessible to global and local. Or you can use it to link to your existing Documentum or Viva Vault or whatever systems you might have in place. The second part of that question is does it allow you to enter content that you can then draw into a document to reuse in other documents? So the document authoring aspect that we mentioned in some of the slides. Michelle, are you able to talk to that one a little bit?
Yes, so there are, for certain products like PVAs or signal evaluations, you can author sections within. You can set the users, give them the rights, and you can start with the document in Orbit, send it through review cycles as well, set reminders to the groups and notifications when they need to take action. And then once the document is authored, finalized, and approved, then you can instantly take that and start distributing and notifying locals or internal and external stakeholders that a new document or an updated document is ready for their review and assessment.
Great, thank you, Michelle. And just to mention, we covered a lot of the functionality of Orbit here in the webinar today. We are going to do some subsequent webinars, and we will explain these document authoring aspects in a little bit more detail. There is another question here around, does Orbit track the current approved versions of RMPs? So yes, absolutely. It has the ability to maintain the relationships between all of the RMPs, whether that's your core version that's approved for implementation and any local versions that are active or approved. And you can configure the system to your own nomenclature or whatever your internal wording is in your existing trackers. So you can configure those labels to whatever your needs are. And also it provides that nice audit trail. If the core RMP is updated, you can retire the version that's currently in Orbit, but you can also use it as a template. You can copy all of the information that's already in the database and create the new version and edit the new version there. You don't have to re-enter all of the information every time you have an update to an RMP, for example. So there's a question come through, can we talk about the reconciliation tracker, and could this be used to track and remind on reconciliations for market research agencies, patient support program vendors, and all the other external stakeholders? This isn't something that we've talked about actually in the webinar so far about reconciliation tracking. Sorry to throw this one over to you again, Michelle. Is there anything that you could talk to about how the reconciliation tracker works in Orbit?
Yes, it's actually a new feature that has been added, and I actually do need to get back to you on that. I don't fully know the features yet, being fully new, but it is a neat feature that was recently launched over in one of the big pharma companies. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, but I think in terms of the question that was being asked, I think absolutely you can set up tasks in the system. If your market research or your external agencies, your patient support program providers have access to the system, either through your IT infrastructure, or they're provided a username and password and credentials to access the system, and they're set up as users in the system, absolutely they can be notified in the same way that they have tasks to complete. You as the MAH can set the due dates for those tasks. You can set the frequency, the recurrence, and how you want them to be notified, and which fields within the system are mandatory for your partners or your external vendors to complete. And they would receive emails to their inbox that they have a task, that a due date that's approaching, and for them to mark a record, to move that record through the workflow, they would have fields that were mandatory. They would have to provide the date that it was completed, or they would have to provide some documentary evidence that they've performed their task. I believe so. There's a question around, is it possible to limit user views in Orbit so they only see products or compounds that they are assigned to? So yes, in the same way that you would set up user groups or permissions around creating tracked items in the system. So I was sort of talking about risk management user group only creating RMPs and the safety scientists, the PV safety scientists only creating signals. You could create a set of permissions you could set up user groups in the system that have product level responsibilities, and you could set up permissions that they could only create tracked items relating to their product responsibilities. So yeah, it's a nice way as well to ensure that the data that's being entered into the database is kept clean, that users can only create relevant information that they would need to, that they're not accidentally populating the database with junk information, basically. It's also worth noting on that point that the workflow for these tracked items, the items can only be deleted whilst they're in a draft or new state. So if you accidentally create a record, absolutely you can delete it and it disappears from the database. But as soon as you move that tracked item through its workflow, so you send it for an approval internally, or you mark it as approved, or the implementation is underway, that record then cannot be deleted from the database. It's there forever as part of the audit trail and the history. So that when you come to pull reports from it, none of the users have permission to permanently delete information from the database. It's there for you to pull audit reports from, basically from the day the system goes live. We've covered most of the questions, all the questions, sorry, that have come into us through the Q&A function. I'll just give it a couple more minutes in case anyone has any more burning questions. But I just want to say thank you to everybody for your time today and for joining. I hope you found it useful. And like I was saying, we are going to cover all of these different use cases and all of the different tracker types in more detail in upcoming webinars. And you will hear from our marketing team about those in the very near future. Thank you very, very much for your time. And we look forward to hearing from you in the future. I've also been reminded to let you all know that my colleagues are attending the DIA Summit in San Diego in a couple of weeks' time, and they'll be presenting there, and we will also be there in person with a stand. If you do have any questions around Orbit or any of the other areas of risk management and benefit risk that we work in, please do come along and say hello to us at the DIA if you're lucky enough to be in San Diego. Thank you, and talk to you soon. Bye.
And that's goodbye from me as well. Thanks very much for joining. Thank you, Michelle, for your input. It was great to have you on the line. Feel free to contact myself or Piers if you have any questions in the meantime, and hope to hear from you again on our subsequent webinars. Thank you very much, everybody. All the best.